What's going on, guys? Don't change the channel. Your eyes are not deceiving you. We genuinely are back. I genuinely am back to 100%. I sound like a normal human being again. Welcome to the 90... I want to say 5th, because we didn't actually give you a show last week, but you got an interview. The show is the edition and the So welcome to the 95th edition of the Chronicles of Podcast. And Jamie, trying to think back, how do we do this again? I do believe that somewhere in the vicinity of this area that we host and do a show in are the Chronicles of Jennifer Batten.
Yeah, they are, baby.
Absolutely delicious. Well, what are we all waiting here for? Oh yeah, for me to do something. Hit it!
Hi there, you're about to enjoy the Chronicles of Tom and Jamie.
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin Mann.
Hey guys, my name's Annabelle Knight.
Hello, this is Becky Baldwin.
Hello, I'm Chesney.
Hey, what's up everyone? This is Braden from Say We Can Fly.
Well, no, she could probably kick all your asses as well, so that's probably why you probably feel the jealousy bug a little bit there.
Boys and girls, put it together as we bring you the Chronicles of Jennifer Batten.
I mean, we've got an absolute doozy of a guest as well. This is an unbelievable show. I'll bring that piece in, shall I?
Oh, yes, please.
Welcome to the Chronicles of Jennifer Batten.
Yes, this week we are joined by Jennifer Batten, a guitarist and solo artist who has toured all over the world and still doing so to this day. Most notably, she's known for her time working with two very special artists. One being the man, the myth, the legend that is Michael Jackson, touring the world with Michael, doing several world tours with him, and also working with an idol of hers, which makes this story so much more special as well. And that is the legendary Jeff Beck as well. Like, just two incredible guitarists together there. And this is absolutely phenomenal. And obviously, I did mention that she's a solo artist. She has 3 solo albums, all of just guitar music as well. No vocals. You just get to listen to Jennifer just picking her funky stuff. And my God, she's incredible. And yeah, this is an unbelievable story. I love this one.
So, 2 things. My internet cut out. Well, my laptop died at the very beginning of this interview, so I do disappear very briefly, but I am back. And secondly, this interview was done the day after my dental surgery, so I sound like a complete fool. So I do apologize if you can't understand me. Put the captions on for subtitles or something. I was in a lot of pain. But this is an interview that we couldn't pass up. I didn't want to miss out. I wanted to be a part of it. So Jennifer, I just want to say a massive apologies for the fact that I hardly spoke. I wasn't being disrespectful, I promise. It just hurt too much to talk. So forgive me. But this interview is amazing. And yeah, again, it's one of those things where you sit here and you go, fucking hell, we have talked to some unbelievable people, but this one is gigantic. Because obviously she played for Michael Jackson, she played for Jeff Beck, and she's just an absolute badass. She's such a badass. So I'm very, very excited to get this one out there. Jamie!
Yes, sir.
Do you have any final words at all with any dignity?
Just a massive thank you to Jennifer for spending a bit of her time and talking to us. She has had an incredible life, an incredible career, and it meant the absolute world that she was willing to sit down and share that with us. This is double superb.
Yeah, I reiterate what Jamie said. Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to sit and chat with us. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you for being a part of our show. It really meant the world. And now we can't wait for everybody to hear it. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, interviewing this week, it's Jennifer Batten.
You hear me?
Yeah, beautifully.
Okay.
Cool.
Did you just break your glasses in half? What was that?
There's a magnet in the middle.
Oh, that is amazing.
See, I used to buy these readers like $1 a piece, and I'd end up with a dozen of them in the room I wasn't in. So they just hang on my neck always, except when I'm sleeping.
That's great. I was just literally it's like magician, like magic. It's just like, what's going on here? How are you, Jennifer? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time out to do this. Really appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah.
Wonderful. Basically, what we do is I'll do a little introduction and then we'll bombard the living hell out of you with questions. How does that sound?
Go for it.
That's what we like. Come on, let's get this underway. Ladies and gentlemen, this week we bring you a guitar legend. This week's guest is a session guitarist and solo artist who has worked with some of the biggest names in the industry, including a couple of names you may have heard of, like Jeff Beck and Michael Jackson. A woman who can rock a leather mask like no other, has mastered the two-hand tapping technique, and a woman who broke down doors for future generations of female guitarists. Boys and girls, put it together as we bring you the Chronicles of Jennifer Batten.
That's the first time anybody's given me props for that ghastly leather mask.
Oh, there's questions about that mask later on. Don't you worry about that.
Oh, no doubt. I have answers.
But first things first, Jennifer, how have the last few years been for you, obviously with the pandemic and everything, and obviously everything like shut down? How have the last few years been?
The pandemic was a slice of hell for me and every artist on the planet. But now it's just booming. I think people are so hungry to get out and see music and play music that I would bitch about not being home enough before the pandemic, and now I'm like, get me out of here. So yeah, it's a good balance. I take July and August off. I've done that the last few years to play in town with my local band. So I don't want to miss the summer in Portland because it's short and beautiful.
Amazing. I can only imagine like being on the road for all those years. Every now and, like you say, every July and August, like I'm not going anywhere. This is me time. Don't even.
Yeah. Yeah, man. When people ask me, "Oh, you've been so many places in the world. Where would you go for vacation?" I say, "My back porch." And it's free.
So before we get into the good stuff, take us back. What did young Miss Batten want to be when she was growing up? Was it always been music for you, or was it something completely different?
I remember when I was in 6th grade, we were asked that question. We were supposed to write it down and turn it in to the teacher. And at that point, I wanted to be a forest ranger because I was really into the outdoors, and I really got into backpacking as a teenager. But things morphed along. I started playing guitar when I was 8 years old, and I announced to my mother when I was 12 that I wanted to be a professional musician, and she wisely said, "Well, honey, that's a very competitive business." And often I think I should have listened to her. But when you're 12, it doesn't mean anything. It's like, okay, well, that's what I want. So obviously I do think about her warning when for instance, the trip I took was to Brazil, and I had a 25-hour flight delay.
Oh.
So, yeah, there's just all kinds of fuckery that there's nothing you can do. You can either quit the business or go home crying or go, okay, well, guess I got to get a hotel for the night and try again tomorrow. And it was so delayed that I missed the tour bus. So I had to, once I landed in Sao Paulo, I had to fly to, I think, Brasilia to catch up with the tour bus. Fun times.
The bit that I find quite mental, though, is when you're at school, they say you're in 6th grade and teachers go, cool, so what do you want to be when you grow up? You go, I don't know. There's so much pressure when you're so young.
You got to explore. People are living so long that it's not uncommon to have 2 families. That's not my scene, but often men especially will have a family and a career, and then midlife crisis and go, fuck it, and then have a whole other family and a whole other career. So, that's why we're on Earth, right? To explore and see what suits our fancy.
So you obviously have, and have from a very young age, from what I could tell, have this love for rock and guitar music. Where did that love come from? Was that from your parents or somewhere completely different?
My parents were really supportive, and my dad especially was a huge jazz his whole life. And gosh, I mean, when he passed, one of the things I brought back from his house was like buckets and buckets and buckets of CDs. And he was so anal retentive, man. I mean, like his garage looked like a Home Depot shop, or what they call it, tool station in the UK, where everything had its place. Unfortunately, I didn't get that gene, but early on, he essentially created a jukebox where he had remotes for these different things that would hold 200 CDs each. And he had a stack of them, and he'd open his book and had typed out exactly what everything was. It was just crazy. So I have all that now. So yeah, music was huge, and I remember when the Beatles hit. I mean, that was a lightning strike to America, big time. And I remember sitting in front of the TV, the Ed Sullivan Show. There was only 3 channels in black and white, and it was the biggest thing in town. And everybody I knew was into the Beatles. Every time a new single would come out, we'd grab it and go to each other's houses and listen to it over and over and over. And I also recall my parents taking me to some events, and there'd be bands there, and I'd be at the front of the stage just staring, just soaking in the vibrations and the frequencies. And to me it was really magical. And my sister got a guitar, and I was jealous, of course. So the next Christmas I asked my parents for a guitar and got one and started lessons immediately and never stopped.
That's amazing. I often wonder, when the Beatles stepped foot onto that stage on the Ed Sullivan Show, did they know just how many future musicians they were going to inspire by doing that one TV show? Because the amount of interviews you hear, you go, "Oh, the Beatles and Ed Sullivan, that was it for me." Like,
Yeah, they couldn't possibly know, and that was a little before Facebook. News was traveling kind of slow back then. Yeah, there's no way they could know the impact that they would have.
it's crazy, isn't it? So at what point did you decide then, okay, I'm enjoying playing this guitar, but I want this to be a hobby, like I want this to be a career? I know you said earlier it was 12 years old, but what made you be like, no, this is my life?
Um, I think one of the major turning points was I would get my allowance and take my bike down to a record shop once a month and get a Guitar Player magazine and a bunch of blues cutouts, the cheap, bottom basement price stuff. I would get a stack of new records to jam along with. And in one of the Guitar Player magazines, there was an ad for a guitar symposium at Musicians Institute, which at that time was only Guitar Institute of Technology. And it was a 2 or 3 day workshop over the weekend. And I lived in San Diego, so it was a 100-mile drive, and went up there, and everything was over my head. I mean, all these jazz guys talking about substitutions. I'm just going, wow, there's another great piece of information that's over my head, splattered on the wall behind me. But it was intriguing enough that I took a test to get into the school, and I failed. And so I took, I think they suggested a teacher in San Diego, and I took lessons with a guy named Peter Sprague, who was a bebop monster. And it was really, really intense lessons for 6 months, and it really got me caught up to speed, because I had played blues scales, and I'd learned songs from music teachers in shops, but I didn't know harmonic minor, I didn't know chord scales. So he really caught me up on that, and I went to the school about 6 to 8 months later.
It's amazing just how much you can learn just by watching someone else as well, and just being like, I don't know how to do that yet, but I'm going to learn how to do that. Like,
Yeah, as long as you stay inspired, and that's pretty much an endless thing, especially since the internet's been high speed, and I got wicked speed at my house. Everybody around the world can see each other now, and there's all these people that most of them will probably never get a record deal or probably never tour in your town, but they're just monsters. They'll just sit there and look at YouTube videos and get better and better and better. And I only wish I had that access when I was a teenager. I would have gone bonkers. And now with the digital age, how you can slow things down. And even now with AI, there's a new app called Fader, is Faderr. And that you can put any song into it and it will strip it out as stems. And now it'll even strip out the drums to snare, kick, hi-hat. Yeah, and then you can slow that down and see exactly what people are doing. And there's an app I use a lot called Transcribe that allows me to slow things down, but it'll also slow video down. If you get a great video that you can see the guitar player's hands, you can see what string they're picking on and how they're doing it. Are they sweeping? Are they tapping? I would have been all up in that back in the day. I'm a little busier now, but I still use all that stuff. I use Transcribe to learn everything because, you can't strip out stems with that particular app, but you can EQ it. You can get rid of the bass. You can do karaoke mode, get rid of the vocals. And so what's left is the drums and the keyboard and guitar frequencies. So it really helps you be more accurate.
It's crazy how much technology has changed the industry. It really is.
Yeah, and how such young kids are getting so badass so quickly. I mean, it makes sense having access to those tools, but my whole point was the inspiration. I've discovered guitar players on TikTok that are just mind-boggling. I instantly became a new fan of this person I never heard of before.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tom, your audio's off. We can't hear you.
Sorry. My fucking laptop overheated and I went off. And I was like, "You are joking, right? This is the worst time you could have done this." Sorry. What I'm saying was obviously like guitars are going to start evolving into I think there's 12 strings and then there'll be 14 and be 16 and 20. People will be playing things with 5 heads and 5 necks, and it's going to be nuts, I reckon, in the future.
Well, yeah, it's Steve Vai helping to motivate that with a Hydra guitar. Jesus, I have trouble with 6 strings, for Christ's sake. I don't need another neck.
I sometimes look at Steve Vai and just go, "You're just showing off now, mate. You're just showing
Oh,
off."
dude, he had shoulder surgery and he did a video where he played this just wicked solo with just one hand, just all hammers and pulls. And he's just going, I just want to bitch slap you, all right? It's that's just crazy.
So forgive me if my research skills are absolutely dreadful, but when looking on the internet earlier, the earliest thing I could find for you online was your work with Michael. Was that your first professional work, or had you done stuff before then?
That was the first decent paying gig for sure. Before then, I was living in North Hollywood and playing in Hollywood with 6 or 7 different bands and mostly original bands that played once a month. I had worked with an Elvis impersonator. That was the first tour I ever did in the South Pacific. And I couldn't tell you what I got paid on that, but I remember our gear got stuck in Hawaii, so it never made it to the island. And the promoter ran off with the pre-ticket sales, so we were sleeping on the local chief's floor for the rest of the tour.
Oh, God.
I mean, it sounds ghastly, but at that age, I was going, "Oh, man, this is the shit." We're on this exotic island, eating fresh fish and playing music, and I was kind of hooked on exploring the world.
That's amazing. So let's talk about the work with Michael. How did this come about? Were you approached? Did you audition? How did this happen?
I auditioned. I was one of the lucky ones that heard about the auditions. He had a guy looking for people, and they called Musicians Institute, which had a referral service. And I was one of the people that they referred. So I asked when the last possible time I could audition would be so I could stay home and work on tunes. And I want to say maybe 3 days later, I went in, and there was no band. It was just me by myself, and the only guidance I was given was to play some funky rhythm because that would be most of the show. And I did. And then I started soloing, and I played the Giant Steps tapping solo that I worked out for my debut record because I had done a demo for that already. And then I finished with Beat It because I had played that in a cover band for several years. And a couple days later, I came home to my cassette answering machine, old school. And there was a message that said, Michael's interested, come down, play with the band and see how it goes. And next thing I know, I got a passport and a ticket to Tokyo.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, sure, it's Tokyo. My God.
Oh, yeah, you've won the band. Can you come to Japan? Like, yeah?
Yeah, they asked me if I would be available to take a year and a half off, and I said, take me anywhere for any length of time. It was a gas, man. It was just a paid vacation, honestly.
I can imagine that. I just love the fact your first show was it the Tokyo Dome as well, like, or Budokan, is it? I can't remember the name of it.
It was before the Tokyo Dome was built. It was I can't remember the name of it. I think I want to say, on that first tour, we played Japan twice. We came back with a whole new show at the end of the tour because the tour was a year and a half long, and there were more songs that were released on the radio at that point. He didn't want to play anything that hadn't been on the radio. So we came back with a whole other thing, and I want to say the second time the Tokyo Dome was ready for us.
Absolutely.
So it was 1987, many, many years ago.
So is that how it worked back then? Like, you find out who's holding auditions and you just go along?
Well, I found out it really, most of them are word of mouth. And you got to be in the cliques, and I'm not that social, and I didn't go to parties or anything. When I moved from San Diego to LA, the musicians union there had a rule that if you're going to join the musicians union, you have to show up every Monday for 6 weeks, basically to prove you actually live there, because they have a much better musicians deal than other states because it's so busy with the film industry and record industry. And so every Monday I would come, and they had this big book of gigs that were available, and I'd flip through and go bar mitzvahs, weddings, all this stuff I had no interest in. And finally I asked the guy behind the counter, I go, well, where are the cool gigs at? And he just kind of chuckled and said, it's word of mouth. And it kind of was. Michael had wanted David Williams. He's the guitar you hear on a lot of Michael's stuff, Billie Jean, the solo in Billie Jean, and a lot of Madonna's top songs. But he was out with Madonna, and that tour was extended, so they had to get other players. And Paul Jackson had a sub, John Clark, that he used a lot. So he suggested John. I don't know if John even had to audition, honestly, but they needed 2 guitar players, and the other one was audition.
That's amazing. So who else did you audition for back in the day? Was it just you got the first one, Michael, or did you audition for other people?
I went straight screaming to the top, dude. The only other audition I had done was for a cover band. And my dad had given me a loan when I moved to LA to get started. And that money went away so fast. And, it just got to the point where, shit, I'm going to have to get a day job if I don't get this last gig that I'm auditioning for. I mean, there was no name auditions before Michael. But I learned a bunch of songs. I even sang. And at the end of the audition, the guy goes, yeah, that was really good. But, we always have trouble with chicks. And I thought, why would you even waste my time, for God's sake? So that didn't happen. I had to get a day job. I was a security guard from midnight to 8, and I was trying to get enough students in the afternoon to live on. And I wasn't sleeping. It was hellish for a good 6 months. And then I ended the security guard gig, lost the contract, and I ended up taking Scott Henderson's place at Musicians Institute, teaching because he was off on tour. And I stayed there for a couple of years till I got the Jackson audition.
I just can't get over what you're saying there. That was it? Chicks are nothing but hassle. Who says that?
I think it's so long ago, and stories change mind. So I don't know if this is something I often told friends or actually told the guy, look, I'll bring my own tampons. I'm low maintenance. I only hope that he knows that I got that gig afterwards. Like, meh.
Was it quite? I bet it was quite. Obviously, back in the day, obviously, it's quite a male-dominated industry back then. Obviously, not so much now. Was it quite tough as a female guitarist trying to break through?
I was kind of ignorant. I had blinders on when I went to the Guitar Institute. It was the first time I really realized what a rare career choice it was, because I was the only woman with 59 guys going to the school that wanted a career like that. I can't say that it was tough because I was in 6-7 bands by the time I got the Jackson. Any band that was prejudiced against women obviously wouldn't have me, but there was plenty that would. So I just had a string of really lucky breaks. And once you get the biggest tour in the world, that just kind of breaks down a lot of barriers. And before I had gotten with Jackson, Wendy and Lisa were well known being with Prince in that big movie and Purple Rain and the whole art. So I really thought that the revolution was happening back then in 87. And then, 10, 15 years go by and crickets. There's just like no change whatsoever. But I think with the help of the internet, and as people got higher and higher speeds and YouTube, you were able to upload your videos, then people could see each other and get inspired. And I often say there's not a month that goes by that I don't get turned on to some 7-year-old girl in Indonesia that can kick my ass, So they're all around the world. In fact, that triggered a memory. I judged a guitar contest in India years ago. And there was a girl that, she was the reincarnation of Robert Johnson. She had such a great groove, and I voted her number one, and the other guys, the other guys were shredders, like 80s shredders kind of guys. And judges accused me of voting for her because she was female, and I thought she was the most musical one on stage. So, and I read an update of her. I think she's either gone to Juilliard or Berkeley since then. I think she's living in America, and we'll be hearing about her. I cannot remember her name, but went off on a tangent there.
Yes, no, it's good. We like tangents, but that's amazing, though. I think that's bullshit that obviously they were like, oh, it's just because she's a woman. And it's like, well, no, she could probably kick all your asses as well. So that's probably why you're probably feeling the jealousy bug a little bit there.
Oh, God knows.
But you got to play the Super Bowl halftime show in 1993, the Cowboys and the Bills game, and in front of 1.6 billion people, I think, watched that worldwide. That must have been an unbelievable feeling. That's known as the biggest gig ever on live TV. Is that correct?
I didn't know at the time it was going to be, but I knew it was huge, and it was really interesting. It was really fun because it's only ever going to happen once. Very unlikely I'll ever go back there. And it was a show specifically put together for that was not our normal touring show. So that was fun. And I specifically remember there was parts of the stage that somebody would shoot a pop gun, and these guys, 2 per section, would roll these big pieces of stage out into the center of the field. And they had to do it really fast because you only have the time of a couple of potato chip commercials to get that together and get the band on there and ready to go. And so there was an excitement about that. And it's the only time I ever felt that Michael was nervous, because the pressure had to be enormous, not only because of what he was doing, but because it wasn't his audience. It was a football audience. And when in the beginning doing his normal thing where he pops out of the stage and has sunglasses off and just dead silence for a long time, these are football people going, next. Whereas in his own show, they'd just be screaming the whole time. And then he'd pull his sunglasses off, and there's a whole other wave of screams that didn't really happen at that. So it was just all kinds of different.
You're saying that with Michael, how he was nervous and stuff like that. What was Michael like as a person? Because obviously, us as people, we only know him as this musical genius. But you got to spend like 3 world tours with the man. Did you get to spend much time with him, get to know him, or was it musicians are over there?
I'm not one of those people that because I was on the tour, I call him a friend. He wasn't. We never got any real deep communication time. Most we ever communicated was during rehearsals at the Bad Tour. There was a lot of time on 2 solid months. Well, the first month was the band by themselves, singers by themselves, dancers by themselves. But the second month was in a full production stage with Michael. And there's always a lot of downtime when you have special effects that are happening for the first time and they don't quite work the first time, or we're out front watching the pyro that's going to happen in a song. We did have plenty of time with him, but in part because of who he was. I mean, the biggest star in the world. In fact, a couple months before I got the gig with him, I remember my sister and I were joking that about his marketing. Like, there's Michael Jackson toothpaste, there's Michael Jackson pots and pans. It's like everything is Michael Jackson in the 80s. So it felt a little awkward to talk to him. I was a little shy. We would make some small talk, and I do remember one time he came over to a little cluster of us during a break and asked who had been to Europe before. And I don't think any of us had. And so he really got off on that, being able to show us the world as part of the gig. But he also kind of sighed and said, I've been going there since I was 5. And he goes, I feel like an old man. And he was 29. So he lived a lot of lifetimes within his life.
Imagine, to be fair. You saying that then about Michael being on everything and everywhere. My favorite band in the world is Kiss. He gets no judgment from me.
Yeah. You know what? There was one gig, I remember this so well, in Cork, Ireland. I had a dream the night before the show that hardly anybody showed up, and that we played in a canyon, and there was people on top of the canyon that were there for free, but nobody paid to come in. It's like there was zero marketing or something. And of course, it was just a dream. But also in Cork, that was one place in the world that every single shop was about Michael. They had Michael clocks and T-shirts, and I went into a diner, and all of the food listed was like the Dirty Diana omelet, the Billie Jean burger. I mean, it was just the hugest thing that had ever hit that town.
That's amazing. Yeah, we mentioned earlier about the solo for Beat It. Had you ever spoken to Eddie about that solo? I know you mastered it before being in tribute bands, but had you ever spoken to Eddie about learning how to play that or anything like that afterwards?
He made me play it for him. During a break in the Bad Tour, I had a gig that was already booked with a band I had been playing with, and Eddie was next door with his tech working out sounds or something. And I remember I came to rehearsal, and it was one of those LA days where the traffic was horrible and it was hot and awful, and I was stressed out, and I showed up late to rehearsal, and that band manager ran up to my car and said, Eddie Van Halen's next door and he wants you to prove you can play the Beat It solo. And I just looked at him and go, no. Partly because all of my cool guitars were on the road. And I just had a Steinberger with that wacky trem. And I felt really uncomfortable. But his tech finally came over and said, well, will you just say hi to him? And I go, well, of course. And so I walk in, and as soon as I did, he strapped his 5150 Strat on me. And which anytime I play a guy's guitar, it hangs down to my knees. I wear mine a lot higher than your average rocker. And so I played it for him, and it was a little bit awkward because I have my tremolo set, so I know where it is at all times, and his would swing. So anytime I went to reach for it, it's like, oh, where the hell is it? I have to grab it. And then he put the guitar on and tried to remember the solo, because he just played it down. He never played it in his band. So, and it had been, this was 1987 or 1988. and I think he recorded it in maybe '84. So it had been years, and obviously he picked it up really quickly. And I would have given anything to have a smartphone back there and video it, because although we were playing exactly the same notes, there were several passages where he was playing it a different way. And still, there's one passage that he does this ridiculous stretch that I can't manage, so I have to bring in the right hand and tap a note that he just stretches to. It's a bitch of a solo. There's several things in there that if I don't get a harmonic pop out, I'm going, God, now I got 12 more bars. I'm just going to be pouting.
Out of interest, when was the last time you played it?
The last time, I'm constantly playing it. The last couple years, for some reason, all of the tributes have come out of the woodwork. And last year I played with 7 different Jackson tributes, which sounds like an easy gig, but they all sing in different keys. They all have different formats, and I have to study for every single one. In fact, I'm doing one Saturday that all the keys are so different. I'm bringing an E-flat guitar because it's just easier to manage. There's a couple of them that are just amazing, and they're both, the top ones really are Brazilian. For some reason, Brazil has so many great musicians, just ridiculous. Matias Asado, Lori Basilio, and a lot of old school guys. Joe Beam, obviously. But these are real money productions, and to put on a Michael Jackson show is not cheap. These guys got full LED screens in the back and ramps, and Rodrigo Teaser, somebody that I just played with a couple weeks ago, he's got the thing called the toaster that pops you out of the stage, which, you can't travel with that. It'd just be a ridiculous expense. But in Brazil, we used it. And it takes a lot of money, a lot of effort. You got to have the costumes. They have to be custom made. And then the dancers, you got to provide costumes for the dancers. So people have asked me if I ever wanted to start my own, and I go, oh, hell no. I don't want that kind of stress. Even if I had a sugar daddy, I didn't want the responsibility of putting that together. But it's really fun. It's really play with them. All of them. They all have, their shows are all different. So it's fun in that respect. And, a lot of the people that come to the shows weren't even born when Michael was happening. So it's as close as they can get. I've been doing one for 6-7 years in the UK. I go over a couple times a year with Navi, and that's a totally different production, really fun show. And he's been touring the UK since he was a teenager. So it's been decades, and a really healthy fan base that'll come out every time.
That's amazing.
When you obviously joined Michael Jackson, obviously being from the 7 bands, was it quite, obviously the contrast is quite drastic, going from playing to so little people to then all of a sudden it's a worldwide thing. How did that feel for you? Was that quite daunting, or were you like, come on, bring it on, bitch, let's do this shit?
It was daunting. I remember the first interview I did, my teeth were chattering just because I think anybody that comes up that reads Guitar Player magazine or Guitarist in the UK, you read these interviews and you have this fantasy in your mind. Well, what if they asked me the same question? What would I say about my gear or whatever? And all of a sudden it's like, boom, here you go. And it's a huge adjustment. A lot of jealousy. People that were doing the same scene, all of a sudden you're elevated and they're jealous. Not just me, but the dancers experience that. There's all different aspects that nothing could prepare you for. But, it's not like going to war, like, holy shit, you're just fight or flight every day. It's more like, in fact, I remember when I landed in Tokyo and got into my hotel room, I remember the thought that I thought I would feel different. I always was pointed towards a similar trajectory, whether it was Michael or some other band. But I was really disappointed that I was still me with the thoughts that I had, 3 months ago. So it's very hard to explain unless you've been through it.
I can imagine, to be fair. Like, it's got to be so surreal. It really has.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, I remember, Ibanez was huge in the 80s. Everybody started playing Ibanez, and they were putting tens of thousands of dollars into ads and guitar magazines, and they made people pop, like Frank Gambale and Scott Henderson, and you'd see them with these bright colored guitars. And I thought, man, I want to be with Ibanez. And I had worked at Valley Arts Guitar Shop teaching lessons in North Hollywood, and there was a retail guy that I knew that I worked with that went to Ibanez, and I thought, great, my connection. And crickets, nothing.
Oh.
As soon as I got the Jackson gig, it's like, boom, we'll bring you a trunk of guitars to choose from. So that opens up a whole new world of options, obviously gear endorsements and stuff, but also critique, especially at that time. There's super badasses. There's Nita Strauss and Neely Brosh and Laurie Basilio. So there's a lot of people on the scene that are super badass players. But back then, we could go back to the jealousy. I think there was a lot of guys that were super pissed off, and even more pissed off when I got the Jeff Beck gig. I mean, that hit a lot closer to home. In fact, before I got the Jeff gig, I had a session with Angela Bofill, singer, and I flew to Chicago to do it. And Hiram Bullock was hired to do the rhythm guitar, and I was doing the solo on a song. And Angela introduced me to Hiram and said, "This is Jennifer. She plays with Michael Jackson." And he looks me up and down and goes, "Oh, so it was a looks thing." And I thought, you bastard, you haven't heard me play one note. Yeah, welcome to my world.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thing, motherfucker. That was my impression.
Well, that's all I got to say about that. Overall, I've been very lucky. I've gotten great gigs, and whatever, backlash I've gotten hasn't been horrible.
That's nuts. Before we move on from Michael, we've got to talk about it. I mentioned it at the start. We've got to talk about it. The mask. Where did this come from? Where was the idea for this mask?
Drum roll. Somebody had given Michael Jackson it was a beautiful art book of airbrushed paintings with the subject of S&M. And there was this, leather mask, leather coming across the nose, under the chin, and a ball gag. And somebody showed me that and goes, "That's what he wants." And I'm going, we need to talk. I mean, can you imagine doing a 2-hour show with a ball gag in your mouth, like drooling onto your strings, and what that would do to your jaw? And I go, dude, ask him if we can lose the ball. And he was totally cool with it. I mean, it's the most ghastly, dreadful look. And at that point, I just got justified in my mind, just going, okay, it's not just a concert. It's not just music. It's theater. So I'm playing a part. So that's how mentally I got through it. And honestly, it was a lot easier to put on because the wig was attached to that. Instead, in the first tour, it would take hours. I had these wefts of hair sewn into the back of my head for volume, and then hours of teasing and hairspray, and 2.5 hours for every show. With the history tour, it was like, boom, here's your leather headdress. Done.
I was going to say the hair looks absolutely magnificent coming out the top of it as well.
It was magnificent. And when the tour was over, I just didn't want to go out because I couldn't do that myself. And I thought, well, I got to have something on my head. So I started wearing hats.
But the question is, do you still have one of those masks?
Oh, no. I did. At the end of the Bad Tour, they wanted to sell us the costumes and nobody was buying it. And so they ended up giving it to us all. And I took the laser headdress that I had, which is useless without having the actual laser machine. And I ended up selling a bunch of stuff to Hard Rock and Julian's auctions. After it's been in your closet for 20 years, you go, why?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to mention, I wasn't sure on the time scale of this, so I thought I'd just throw it in here now. You auditioned to play for Ozzy, is that right?
Oh, I didn't get an audition. I wanted to audition, and I learned a bunch of tunes, but and I know I got my demo to the right people, but I just didn't get a chance. And he was auditioning tons of people in LA. I know there was an article that came out about that made me sound really pissy, and it's unfortunate because I was bummed I didn't even get a chance at the time, but honestly I wouldn't have been right for that band, and my mother would have been really distraught.
To be fair,
But I did run into him.
Yeah, probably not a good idea.
He was rehearsing at the same rehearsal studios that I was at one point, and I did run into him, and I like a dope, I mentioned him eating bats. And then he knew about my Flight of the Bumblebee video, and he goes, "Well, you were covered with bees, so what the fuck?" I go, "You got me there."
Yeah, but I didn't eat them.
Yeah. Didn't get rabies. I'm allergic now, though, sadly.
Oh, to bees?
I am, yeah. I got through the video okay, but a year later, I was walking up a mountain, and I knew there's this area where they had a bunch of bee boxes that they would use for pollinating. And I thought, now I'm at one with the bees. I've done this thing. And I got stung, and I continued to walk, and I thought I pulled the stinger out. And boy, 20 minutes later, I wanted to rip my scalp off. It was so itchy. I hauled ass back to my car, which was at least a half hour, maybe more of a walk, and called my dad, early cell phone time, and he just said, "Get to urgent care," because obviously I was allergic at that point. Thankfully, it didn't close up my throat. It just hit me in another way, but I do carry an EpiPen now in case next time isn't so lucky.
Bloody hell.
The things you do to sell records.
Yeah.
Stupid.
So speaking of the Flight of the Angry Bumblebee, in between tours with Michael, you started making your own solo records, starting with Above, Below, and Beyond. What made you decide to start making your own records?
I was on the path. I wanted to be a somebody. That's kind of what you do. Once you've spent X amount of years playing, you want to express yourself on record, or at least I did. I will say, when I was at guitar school, I thought a year from now I'll have my first record out, and 10 years later, it finally happened. But yeah, I wanted to be on that path. Joe Satriani was huge at the time, and Steve Vai were touring as instrumental guitar players, and I thought, like, why not me? So I was able to put that record out, and then I got another Jackson tour. I got the Dangerous tour, right? The Above, Below, and Beyond record came out. So I was able to use that and all the travel we were doing to do promotion and hire a publicist to do interviews. Sadly, though, the record company didn't have anything happening in Europe. And so all the buzz and all the magazines, nobody could get the record. And so whatever, it did what it did. And then I put out the next record myself, Momentum, with Glenn Sobel, who's doing so well now. He spent a lot of years in LA hoping for a good gig, and he's been with Alice Cooper for at least a dozen years now. And right now he's out with the Hollywood Vampires. I just saw a great video. They're doing a tribute to Jeff Beck, because Johnny Depp is in that, and that was his bestie the last 6 years. And then when I did my next record, starting to mix it when I tour. So that was a real crunch. That was really stressful, trying to do all of that and do these long rehearsals. So I put out those two records, And then the third record was all the stuff I wrote for Jeff Beck when I was with him, except for I think one track I wrote after that. And it's all the stuff that he didn't take. I put out myself on the, I can't even, oh, it's called Whatever. I was thinking, I can't think of the name of the record. It's called Whatever. And that's also a DVD because I got into filmmaking at that point and launched a solo show where I play in sync with films.
Oh, awesome. That sounds awesome. Was there ever an idea to record vocals of your music, or did you go in and go, nope, this is going to be instrumental, and that is it?
Well, I don't sing for shit. I gave a concert for my friends when I was 18. That was my first performance ever. And I had worked on all these Doobie Brothers and Allman Brothers and Led Zeppelin covers for months and months and months. And I had an electric show and an acoustic show, and I had all my friends there, which was probably a dozen people, and I filled the cooler with some cheap wine. And a funny thing happened. All of a sudden, when I had an audience, my voice didn't behave the same because I was nervous and I couldn't easily hit the note that I hit prior. And I listened to the recording the next day and stopped singing for 20 years. And then, I mean, there's a whole thing of working with singers, right? Anybody that's been in a band knows that there's always going to be some kind of drama there. And like I said, Satriani was huge. So I thought, okay, instrumental is a thing. So that's what I want to do because that's what I do. I want to play the melodies and the solos. So that's what I did. It was the producer that got a singer to sing Respect on my first record. But I really don't have any other vocals except on the third record. I have a bunch of samples of stuff.
It's not missed though. That's what I really enjoyed about listening to that first time. You're not sitting there going, "Where's the vocals?" Because of the way you play it, it's sort of like guitar does the vocals. If that makes any sense, what I'm trying to say.
That's what I'm trying to go for. I think most musicians that play instruments are frustrated vocalists because that's the ultimate in emotion. There's so much you can do with your voice. And in fact, funny you should say that because I did another record with a singer named Mark Scher called Battle Zone. It's called Cher Batten. And that's a record I didn't even know I was doing because he hired me to do sessions and I did 3 or 4 solos. And he called me up and said, your guitar sounds like another voice on the record, so I want you to be a bigger part of it. And the record was almost done except for solos, so it was a lot more painless than doing my own stuff. So I ended up playing on every track, and that was put out. But, you know, the music industry's gone to shit. So unless you got a huge label that's going to really push it and get you on endless tours and all that, and even if that happens, you're not going to make any money these days, you know, because everybody can get your stuff for free. And streaming pays like $5 for 5 million spins or something. And so you got to think of other ways to make money, which for me is live playing and doing instructional videos for truefire.com. And I do a lot of recording. People send me tracks from around the world, and I love doing that when I'm.
It's amazing. Like we speak to a lot of young musicians, and when we do this show, and we do some work for another company, and a lot of them are saying, you know, like we've still got full-time jobs. We can't do this for a living. It's just not viable anymore.
Yeah, and you know, in America, a lot of our industries are going through the same thing. The writers' strike is because the money's not there, and the money's not there. A lot of people are stealing it, or streaming is so cheap that the revenue that they got 20 years ago is not the same. And now the actors are talking about going on strike as well. And then you got AI coming in that can replace writers potentially. So they're trying to put it in their contract that you can't use AI. And of course, the money people are going to go, well, why would we want to pay you if we can get it for free? It's a really crazy time right now for art. And art has always been a scuffle, almost always. You know, back at Robert Johnson, what did he get, $50 to record an entire record that took him probably years to get together? You can't just fart out a new record every 6 months. Well, Joe Bonamassa does, but most people can't do that. I mean, creatively, if nothing else.
Yeah. It's just going back. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say the whole AI thing. I mean, you totally lose human emotion. So it'll almost become, I think it'll become quite boring because it'll be so monotonous and robotic in a way. Basically, is what it is, isn't it? You lose that sort of creative sort of mindset and style of this person or that person or whatever. It's just going to be like, write me a movie about this. And be like, blah, there you go. I don't know. It kind of loses. It's killing the industry massively. Like, technology has advanced way too far now, and it's just destroying everything.
It's a hard call, I mean, they said the same thing when drum machines came out, and one of drummers would hate me, but one of my favorite drum solos of all time is programmed. So I can't think of the artist right now. He's a techno guy that just, you get the sounds that an acoustic drum kit can't get. And if you have a human running it that's putting creativity into it or combining it with AI, I mean, so much of what's on the radio now sounds like a formula anyway. And it's just a human formula going, okay, these last 50 songs all had this, they're at this tempo. In fact, I used to do sessions for this Italian techno producer, and they had a limit of, I want to say, they could only go from 160 beats a minute to 164. That was their range. And the formula is verse, chorus, maybe a solo. So that formula is already there. And if you plug that into AI and say, make me a fascinating love song with, these elements, it could come up with some stuff, not on its own and not today, I don't think, because I've experimented a little bit with ChatGPT. In fact, I said, okay, I've had the same biography for years now, so write an engaging biography. And so they wrote, and Jennifer Batten was playing in clubs at 15 years old. And I thought, my mother would have been so pissed. I was not. But, I'm not going to use things that are untrue, but there might be elements I can take of that. Because, I mean, it's just drawing from stuff that's already out there. But then Sarah Silverman, the comedian, is suing, I don't know if it's ChatGPT or something, for stealing her comedy. So it's very interesting times. It's like the old west of what's going to get through, and government is always so slow that artists tend to get screwed way before there's any rules put in place for a new technology.
It's a crazy world, like you say. And ChatGPT, it is quite fun. I remember ages ago when it first came out, we did an interview. I was like, I'm intrigued, so I literally wrote, "Give me questions for an interview with this person," and it gave me like 15 questions. I think I used like one or two of them. I was like, "These are actually good questions. Cheers." It's crazy that it can do that, though.
Well, you just look at the factories that are using robots to do human work. It just makes sense that everybody wants to make more money for the least amount of output. So there you go. It's not anything we can control, so you just kind of got to suck your thumb with it.
Back to stuff you can control, and what you could control was your second album, Momentum. Like my little segue. You sort of used a different approach to that, and you could feel a lot more like worldly influences on that record. Where did that idea come from? Was that from touring the world and hearing all these different sounds, or was it just something you wanted to try?
I think it's a combination of things, and one was Sunday mornings watching Tarzan movies, and that all took place in Africa, or in theory in Africa, and the tribal drums and just the whole scene in the jungle that it set would just, when you're a kid, you're not thinking about that. What's my next appointment? What's happening at noon? Got to walk the dog. It's like you're in it. You're in the jungle with Tarzan. Combined with one of my favorite bands of all time is Weather Report, and there are so many ethnic influences through those records, and Joe Zawinul's solo material too. I just love it. So yeah, that just made sense for an angle that I wanted to go for. And that record, I was kind of celebrating my freedom because ADATs were born. So all of a sudden, you can make a record at home instead of when I did my first record, I got the shit hours. There was a rapper, the first act on, I can't think of the, Jimmy Iovine. It's a huge label that started with rap. There was a rapper, a Latin rapper named Gerardo that had a huge hit, Rico Suave. And he had the big money budget and he got the daylight hours. And I had the little record company budget and I got the shit hours. And I usually wouldn't record before 2 or 3 in the morning. And I never knew, I'd be waiting for a call and just falling asleep. And I ended up putting aluminum foil on my windows so I could sleep during the day. It was rough. But during the process of doing my first record with this producer, he would leave me alone with the, it was like $100,000 ADAT at that time, one of the first digital recording machines. And I learned to punch myself in, and that was a great lesson. And so when I had ADATs, I was able to do everything myself, except record drums. I went to a pro studio for that and got Glenn Sobel in there. And it was just the three of us, Glenn Sobel, me, and Ricky Walking, this bass player who, at the time, long before the internet, I would go down to Hollywood, and there was a magazine called Music Connection. And you could go there and find musicians in a Rolodex and listen to their cassette. And so I would go down there for hours, listen to a bunch of people to form a band. And this guy did yakety sax on bass, and I go, "You're my guy." And his personality was just like how he played. And I loved his sound. I loved playing with him. Great attitude. And the three of us loved playing together. And we honestly rehearsed the whole record in his mother's shoe closet, in Glenn's mother's shoe closet. She was a ballerina and she had probably 200 pairs of shoes. And so it was big enough to put a drum kit and a little bass amp and a little guitar amp. So that was really guerrilla recording, doing it all ourselves and putting it out on my label. I have since learned that I'm shit at business.
I just had it in mind when you were sitting there like this in the closet, like, yeah, is like, are you in? Are you in? Get in, come on. And then you'll just like hear them playing like this.
We all probably got some horrendous ear damage from the concussion of that small space. But then, fast forward to 3 years with Jeff Beck, and there are no frequencies left in my ears. Now, I mean, my ears are so damaged that I cannot play with a band without some kind of protection. And for musicians listening, that here's the coolest thing you could do. There's a company called Sonics that makes in-ear monitors, and I think last year or the year before, they put out the cheapest model yet of a thing called 3D Ambient. And they're in-ear monitors that connect to a box. And not only can you have somebody send you a mix, but there's a microphone in each ear, and on the box, you can dial in how much outside ambience you want. And so any show I go to, I will listen, whether I'm participating in the show or in the audience, or even a comedian, because they will always scream into the mic at some point, and it's hard on my ears. I will listen at about a third of the volume. But it's not like plugs that you miss so many frequencies and the dynamics. You actually have these great microphones. So it's actually, they merged with a company called ASI, and you can get them on Amazon for $800. And the originals were $2,500, so it's a steal. So that's how I manage now. There's no way I could play with a band live without some kind of protection.
It's crazy to think like how much damage you must do over the years being on stage, having loud music blaring at you. You don't really think about it when you're just watching a band, but yeah, you think, yeah, it's got to be a lot.
I've read that ears take 48 hours to repair, and if you're playing every night, you don't have a chance. And I remember some nights playing with Jeff Beck, I mean, his tone was so glorious. I felt like I could listen to him at any volume. But the bass and drums, those are another story. And I remember going to sound check, and my ears were hot and sensitive before we went to sound check. And I tried wearing earplugs, and if it was on 11 for the whole show, like a Metallica show or something, it'd be one thing. But you'd be playing Rice Pudding with him, da 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 da. I think that's the one. And then he'd go down to a whisper, and I would find invariably I wouldn't realize that I had this delay going because I wasn't hearing it with the plugs in, and I just eventually just got rid of them. And Rhonda Smith played with him for 13 years with plugs, and that girl's got to be damaged because she was right next to the drums, between drums and guitar. So yeah, ears are sensitive, and once you've lost those frequencies, you don't get them back.
Crazy.
Warning the youngsters.
Yeah. So we've spoke about Jeff quite a few times now. We should probably talk about him really. When you got off tour with Michael in '97, you didn't really get a break because you then went to start working with Jeff Beck. I read somewhere that Jeff was a real early influence on you. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Ever since I first heard him on the radio, there was several tracks on the Blow by Blow record in '74 that were playing on mainstream FM radio. And I was into blues like B.B. King and John Lee Hooker. Mama get mad at Papa when he don't bring no coffee home. And I love that stuff, but and of course I was listening to pop radio and Led Zeppelin and that kind of stuff that was out at the time. But something about Jeff's guitar just spoke to me, and millions of others. It was the biggest selling instrumental record for decades. And I listened to it over and over and over and over. And I was working at a record shop when his follow-up record came out the next year called Wired. And I remember I knew this record was coming out, and I knew the day it was going to drop. And then the shipping company drops it at our front door, and I rip it open, put on the vinyl. And I didn't get it at first because it was so different from Blow by Blow. It took a minute to grow on me because that was Jan Hammer instead of Max Middleton, and it was a whole different vibe. But then that became my favorite record. And when I was at GIT, Steve Lynch, who ended up in a band called Autograph, they had a hit called Turn Up the Radio in the 80s. We had an assignment to transcribe a tune with a solo and play it live with a band. They were hiring bands at that time because it was before drums and bass were in the school. And Steve Lynch, we were all doing these bebop jazz things or Latin, something or other, and Steve played Because We Ended as Lovers off Blow by Blow. And that knocked my socks off. I thought that is more exciting, and that moves me so much more than any of the other things that I'm hearing or playing myself. And so I took it upon myself after school was over. I learned every solo and song on those two records, just back to back. And I had in my mind that I would get on stage and do a Jeff Beck tribute. And I put in all that time, and then I got scared and didn't do anything. But, I mean, talk about an education. Trying to play what he was playing. And, I mean, he invented so much stuff that we take for granted now. Because those were early days of fuzz boxes and amps, and they invented the path for the rest of us to follow that era. Just the bending and the harmonics and the just stuff. He could just play a noise on stage, and it had impact, like an exclamation point. Just the tone that he would get, and he played so unusually. Had these big ass farmer hands, right? And really powerful thumb. And what he did with the tremolo bar, just it's hard to match. I mean, I challenge any guitar play Where Were You and do it in tune. I won't even try because it's impossible. And Jeff said himself that he struggled in the studio, but you hear him play it live, and it's like 99% there. He had such a good ear. If his guitar was out of tune, he'd bend it in tune.
Unreal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it must have been amazing then to actually feature on Who Else and You Had It Coming, his 2 albums when you were there. Must have been obviously if he's been a massive influence on you, then to be able to actually be on his records must have been incredible.
Oh, just the call when he called me up. When the Dangerous tour happened, well, let me back up. There was a keyboard player, Rory Kaplan, that was on the Bad tour. And I was talking about Jeff, and he goes, "Oh, I did some teching for Jeff when he was out with Jan. I'll introduce you to." Well, the bastard never did. So the next tour comes up, and I go, "I know that the Dangerous tour is going to England, and I know Jeff lives in England, so let's match it up." And I went through different channels and invited him to a show at Wembley Stadium, and 2 opening acts went on, and then Michael canceled the show. And it turns out Jeff was turned away at the gate because he missed the openers and wanted to come to see me and Michael. And so I was so distraught. I thought, this just sucks. And so I called him up and said, I don't know when or if they're going to make up the show, but can I meet you anyway? And he said, sure. So the next day I went to Townhouse Studios where he was recording his rockabilly record. And I met him, listened to stuff that he was doing. And during a break, I asked him to play Blue Wind off the Wired record. And I had one of those old school video cameras long before the smartphone. And I didn't charge the battery. I got about 10 seconds of it. But I know. I love your reaction for that. And so I got the spare battery that also had 10 seconds. But anyway, just watching him do it, although I had learned all the notes, I wasn't playing it the way he was playing it. He was bending things that I was just playing the note dead on. And it just opened up a whole, the heavens opened up. It was such an education that day. And we chatted for a while, and thankfully I had a couple friends with me, because although I knew his music, I didn't know him as a person. So it was a little awkward. We weren't friends. So we ended up talking for an hour, and then he drove me back to my hotel in his Batmobile, which anytime he has, half a mile free, he's going to have the pedal to the metal. And I was thinking, man, if I'm going to die in a fiery car crash, this is a rock and roll way to go. And I thought, okay, I probably wouldn't ever see him again, but I got my autograph, and I was able to give him a copy of my first CD that was out at that point, and a video. MTV in the UK was playing the Flight of the Bumblebee video on Headbangers Ball late at night. And so I had just gotten an interview that I had done with them on a VHS, or what do you call it? A PAL format, which we can't play in America. So I gave him a copy of that and just went about my way. And he called me I want to say a month or two later, and said, I finally listened to your record, and let's record together. And I was just mind blown. I would have given anything to have that conversation recorded, because it was a dream I didn't have. I just admired the guy, and any interview he did, I would try to seek it out and learn from it. And every record that he did, I would listen to 1,000,000 times. So it didn't happen for another 5 years. He did a couple tours in between, and I would go see him on tour, and he would say, we're gonna play together. And I always thought, well, you're saying that because I'm in your face. I know how it is to be inspired in the moment, and then you're on to something else. Well, he called me up and said, we got a tour of video, or a tour of video. Just had a thing pop up. Yeah, that's the squirrel mind of today, right? Anyway, tour of Italy. And he just went on the faith of 2 records at that point. And I thought, man, you're bonkers. I mean, we've never played together. How can you just say, come tour with me? So I had a session booked in Milan. Spammer. And so I flew over, and I also booked myself to London. and took a train down to his house, which was a whole other story because public transport and me are a whole different thing, especially with the British trains. And I learned the Guitar Shop record and played it for him in his presence just to make sure he wasn't bonkers. And we played 3 or 4 songs, and then he started playing with me. And then his wife brought out the whiskey about midnight, and we just partied all night, and I had to fly out the next day and do this session in Milan, and it wasn't good. I was in bad shape. And I mean, going from that, can you imagine being hungover, and then you got to do this 164 beat techno that's ging, 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 and the fills were like 4 notes. Okay, fill here. We got another fill coming up here. It's just awful. And I just begged him. We worked for a couple of hours, and I begged him to just let me sleep it off, and let's take this up in the next day. But back to the British trains. Okay, this is my first train experience. I'm all excited. I'm going down to Jeff's place. Well, I didn't know from first class or regular class. I just get in the closest car, and it was empty. And I'm looking at every stop, making sure I stop at my proper stop. I see the stop, and I go for the door, and there's no handle. There's no way to open the train door. And, before I know it, the train starts up again. I'm like, oh, shit, what a nightmare. Then I discover you open the window, and you got to grab the handle from the outside. What? Is your finances that bad in Britain that you can't afford a goddamn handle on both sides of your train? So going to the next stop past where I was at, and thank God I had a couple pound coins, and there was a payphone there that I could call up and call his wife, and his wife was able to, they must have had a smartphone at that time, to call him, and so he grabbed me at the next stop. But Jesus Christ, talk about panic.
So Jeff, get in the Batmobile. Jennifer's lost again. Come on, come get her.
He was very forgiving. Yeah, and he was going, yeah, bollocks, the British trains are shite.
I can imagine working with Jeff, though, must have been a completely different beast from working with Michael, especially with him being a guitar player as well. What were some of those biggest things you took away from that time working with Jeff? Because the man is a fucking genius.
Yeah, he was. It was such a joy and so inspiring and so daunting. Wow. Okay, so I'm in the band, right? Very first day, his manager takes me down to his house and explains that normally the musical director in a Jeff Beck band is the keyboard player. And since I'm triggering keyboards with guitar, I'm it. And I'm just crapping myself wondering if I can last with the band, and all of a sudden I'm the musical director. And I'm just like, the bubble in my head is going, oh shit, let's see how this goes. It was so stressful. But because of Jeff's personality, it was so laid back. He was just like a kid. In fact, Johnny Depp said they spoke of themselves as not geriatric wasn't the word, but elderly toddlers. Just because farts were funny forever, and I'm right up there with him. So he was just a real joyous guy to work with, and I will say I put every waking moment into working on the show and working out sounds and trying to get Max Middleton sounds and Jan Hammer sounds, and just I gave him what he needed. I mean, he needed support, and he wanted new material, and so all my free time I'd be writing, giving him grooves and tunes, and it it's just such a stunning out of the blue collaboration. I just relished it. So I had no problem spending all of my time on it for 3 years. And after 3 years and 2 records, I remember we were in his living room. It was me and Jeff and the bass player Randy. And Randy said something like, that's all we got. You know, there's nothing left in the oil can because we have given everything. And at first I was kind of shocked to hear him say that because in my mind I wanted to be in this situation forever. And then I realized he's right. I had nothing left. I was just completely burnt out. And I mean, it's wonderful to realize that and leave rather than him going, you guys aren't giving it to me anymore. I need to look for other people. And it was in Jeff years, being with him for 3 years is a long time because he would change players always. I mean, he did 2 records with Rod Stewart and 2 records with Bob Tench. And, you know, the Guitar Shop trio only lasted 1 record, which was really sad because it was such brilliant music with Terry and Tony Hymas. But I've read so much stuff after he passed that I didn't realize he was really bummed at that record, the Guitar Shop record, didn't sell better. And the same with the techno stuff that I did with him, that he really thought, okay, we're doing some really off-the-wall modern stuff here, and it didn't take off like he had hoped. Fortunately, the Emotion and Commotion record was really well received. The ballads on that and vocals, of course, vocals are a lot easier to sell. But yeah, it was a real blessing, and he'll be sorely missed. And I've gone back into years and years of emails back and forth, and most of it's comedy. You know? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when was the last time you saw Jeff before he passed?
I saw him last September in Houston. And there's a buddy of mine, Jesse Solomon, and I would go on pilgrimages, I call like every tour he did, I would go see him somewhere at least once. And I remember this was really magical. I was doing a South American clinic tour for Washburn, and I landed in Bogota, and the people that picked me up said, "Hey, Jeff is playing tonight." I go, "When are we done?" You know? And it just happened. Like the clinic was 7 to 8:30, and I signed a few autographs and got the fuck out of there and went to Jeff's show, front row, and spent the evening partying with him. So, you know, there's so many magical things that happen that you couldn't anticipate. I mean, just being his buddy. One time he picked me up from the airport, and we went straight to Ronnie Wood's has a private restaurant in London, or did at that time, and we went there and had dinner, and I just looked like shit. I just got off a plane. I'm just looking like a hippie with a Pendleton and jeans, and you know, it was kind of a fancy club, so I felt a little out of place. But we had dinner with Ronnie, and then we ended up going back to Ronnie's house afterwards. And I saw one of his paintings. You know, he does paintings of the Stones. It was on an easel, half done. And then we went down into his studio and listened to the entire box set of Little Richard, which is something I would never, ever do on my own. But in that setting, it was so magical. And I was so jet lagged. The two of them started jamming at the end of the night. And part of me, my mind was going, this is the only chance I will ever have to jam with Ronnie Woods. And the other part was going, so I didn't, but I listened to the two of them.
What I love is while you've been talking about Jeff, your face has just beamed. Like you look so happy and so proud of those memories of that time you spent working with him. It's amazing to see that even after all these years, you're so passionate about that work you did with Jeff. Beautiful to see.
Yeah, it was a real blessing. A real blessing. Those times were just, you know, impossible to put into words. Anybody that's traveled with him knows, but nobody else really knows. Because when he's on stage, he said one time that when he would go up to the mic to speak to the audience, his knees would buckle. It's just really uncomfortable. And I think that's in part why he kept that hairstyle all those years, because there was a shield. He'd be looking at his guitar, and there's a shield between him and the audience. He's a really humble guy. But, you know, once the party the gig is over at the time, and we'd be drinking champagne and doing fart jokes, and just it's unbelievable. We actually one night in a bar, this was the best ever. His engineer Tony Taverner, longtime friend of his, was with us in a bar after a show. And at one point, I'm sitting here with Jeff here and Tony Hymas here, and we're talking about music. And across the room, Tony Taverner does one of those arm farts like you do when you're 8. And it was so brilliant. And then that's what we did for the rest of the night. We were just working on tone. And it just became a contest that we did every single night after the show. We would get out a stopwatch and see who could do it the longest without laughing. And that lasted for months. Just endless entertainment, to the point where I think that had to be in the UK or somewhere in Europe. And we did an American tour. And it evolved from that to whoopee cushions to, one night I had insomnia in Japan, and I go on farts.com like you do when you have insomnia in Japan. I ended up buying this plastic cup that had putty in it, and you stick your fingers in it, and just the most brilliant, just ridiculous. And you always know the next will be better. Jeff and I blew out the other band members. They just said, fuck it. They went to the back of the bus. They couldn't stand it anymore. And so Jeff and I, every night we'd be doing this, and I ended up with an allergy to it. So rather than stop, I just got gloves so I could continue. One night, the bus driver pulls back the curtain and he goes, "Y'all ain't right." Yeah, and he was absolutely correct, but it was endlessly entertaining to us. And apparently that's what Johnny Depp brought to the party as well. So,
I got to be honest, Jennifer, when I originally emailed you to arrange this, I never once thought we'd be talking about fart jokes with Jeff Beck. This is just...
Well, the audience that doesn't know him just sees him as a serious musician and a god. And you just wouldn't think of... All of his best friends were comedians. Like Vic Reeves was a really close friend for many years. Pete Richardson, who did Stella Street and produced a lot of comedy. So that's his world.
It's amazing.
Hot rods, music, and comedy.
Phenomenal.
But you've got to travel all over the world, Jennifer. Like, where's been your favorite place to play?
Gosh, Japan. I love Japan. It's magical, absolutely magical. Best food in the world, most respectful people in the world. I remember on the bad tour, people would take pictures of us walking in the street and meet us at the airport with framed pictures the next day. It was just crazy. You're walking on the plane with all these crazy gifts. Ireland is super beautiful. I've seen a lot of Italy. I had an agent there, and I had the most beautiful seafront gigs, doing my solo show mostly. Well, with bands too. Spain is gorgeous. So those are some of my faves. It's a lot easier if it's an English-speaking country, honestly. I was just in Brazil, and I was thinking surely in Sao Paulo and Rio they're gonna have a lot more English-speaking people. Get fed was really difficult. I ended up doing a QR code and scanning pictures of food that I wanted. And in fact, this poor bastard, he knew I was trying, and because I'm playing with a band, I hear them count off tunes, and 2 is Dois. So I thought, okay, I know, thank you, and 2. So I thought I was telling the waiter I want to order 2 things, soup and pasta. He brought me 2 pastas and soup, and I go, oh Jesus, I shouldn't even try. Just show this picture and this picture. So that's some of my adventure.
Incredible. Jennifer, your career has been amazing. Just to sit here and talk to you about, you've achieved so many amazing things, like the music we discussed, performed with Slash in Japan, I believe I read. You've made instructional DVDs all the way to performing with Cirque du Soleil. Like, there's so much stuff we haven't even been able to talk about. But if you were to look back and have like a couple of standout moments from your career, like those best days at the office, what might they be?
Oh, absolutely, the Beck years. That was just phenomenal. Always exciting. You never knew what was going to happen or what you'd be invited to. Being down at his house, I told him it was like hanging with Hansel and Gretel. Here, Greta. 3-story, like 14th century mansion with all this property. I went to his wedding reception there, and Layla flew in by helicopter. You know? And Paul McCartney was there, and Jimmy Page, and it's just, you know, stuff that would never ever have happened if I hadn't been in his band. Just, I've been trying to write down a lot of memories since he passed, because it's just so shocking, and all this stuff is flooding back. It's just crazy.
It's amazing. Before we let you get out of here, though, what are you working on at the moment? Anything you can talk about, or anywhere you're playing, anything like that?
Well, I'm home for the summer, so I've been rehearsing my band. We start Friday, and we're playing all summer, and then September I'm taking off to, where the hell am I going? Colombia. I got a couple gigs there, and then a tour in the UK with Navi, with the King of Pop show. Then beginning of October, I'm playing with one of the Brazilian guys in Lisbon and Porto, doing another Jackson tribute. It's kind of, I wake up and the email tells me, it's like Mission Impossible. Your mission today is to book November. And I'm long overdue to do more instructional videos, so I keep thinking about it and not doing it. But there's a lot of things I'm really interested in doing, like whammy bar techniques, and I'll tell the company that's what I want to do a video on, and they'll go, well, that's not going to be a big seller. Doing a beginner's course would be great. And for me, that's such a snore. I'm sure it would sell well, but I want to do things that really fire me up. So he knows what the next thing will be. So just a lot of live playing right now. I would say 6 months ago, I was doing nonstop recording, everything from new age to super hardcore heavy metal. Yeah, just crazy. I love it too, because it challenges me. And I played with his name Micah. He's known as Mr. Fastfinger out of Norway, and he's from Finland. He's kind of known in the guitar world, and he had me play on a track that was in 5/4, so that was a challenge. It came out really good. And I'm making more videos. I'm adding more Jeff Beck songs. I just added this song called Porcupine, and I make a video for my solo show to play that stuff live. So that's what I'm doing. I'm actually super motor mouthing today, but I'm on a tone quest. I recently got into Suhr guitars, and it's just bonkers. It sounds so much better than the guitar I was playing. And so I'm thinking, well, God, if this sounds good, what about this guitar and that guitar? So I'm just going bonkers up my game right now. I mean, I've been endorsed for so many years, and it's been a blessing and a curse, because that's the company you're with. So don't be looking next door. Now, Jesus, I gotta go. I'm a free agent, and it's kind of exciting and expensive as fuck.
Well, as your phone keeps going off, we'll say, Mr. Stevens, do you have any more questions for our wonderful guest?
Just, did you ever think this is where you would be when you were auditioning for bands in LA? Did you ever think that obviously you'd be playing Michael with Jeff and doing your own stuff?
I didn't think of anything specific, but I specifically did this meditation, honestly, for 30 days, this Buddhist chanting kind of thing, for 30 days before I got the Jackson gig, every day and every night. It took a long time. And I was in 6 bands at the time. I didn't like any of them. And I said, I just want to be in the right band. And boom, So So I think there's something to be said for planting your thoughts in the universe and pulling things to you. And, you just can't sit at home on your ass doing nothing and hope something like that will happen. But just being in it, playing every day, spending time with the instrument, engaging with other people that are of like mind, things will happen.
No, absolutely. Jennifer, thank you so much. This has been absolutely unbelievable. It's been so much fun. Thank you.
Sure. Cheers. Take care.
So much.
Yeah.
What an absolutely incredible conversation. Those stories are amazing. And I truly love the passion in her voice when she was talking about that time with Jeff Beck. You could see how much that time of her career meant to her. And I also love the fact I fucking broke her in the intro and I brought up the leather mask. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's always something to be said when you can get people feeling comfortable and start chatting away. It's really nice to be able to sit there and have that conversation with her. And we like to make this show separate and different from everybody else that sits there. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Why do you that? And make it more fun and enjoyable. So Jennifer, again, thank you so much for taking the time out. I know we went over on time, but we were enjoying it so much. It was just great to chat to you. Great to meet you. We wish you all the best for the future going forward with tours, etc. And thank you so much for coming on the show. It truly meant everything to us. We're really excited to release it. So we really hope that you enjoyed listening to it as much as we did recording it. Now that I can talk again.